we are going to go ahead and get started. The time is 1:30. I want to welcome everyone to our Education and Culture Committee meeting. First, want to thank Mr. Howard and Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez for their great work in terms of the packet. I know that unfortunately the superintendent wanted to be here today, but due to scheduling was not able to, so he's represented by his Chief of Staff, Dr. Henry Johnson. We've got General Counsel from Montgomery County Public Schools, Natalia Ahn. We have Director of Student Welfare and Compliance, Mr. Greg Edmondson, and we have Director of Safety and Security with Montgomery County Public Schools, Mr. Ed Clark. I want to welcome all of you here. Welcome to my colleague, Councilmember Navarro. I know that Councilmember Duando was on the joint Fed and GO, and then Fed kept going. So I know that there's been a lot. I know Councilmember Navarro, you were on that as well. So really want to thank you for all of your long duty today. And I want to make sure we get through this discussion in a timely manner, but it also is something that, of course, is very serious to all of us who care about our children and our schools. And that is regarding sexual harassment and assault response protocols. Certainly, one of these that was brought to light was the Damascus High School incident some years ago, in which we actually had some of the discussions around what it is that we needed to do in terms of reporting, as well as make sure that we have protocols in place that we knew would best protect our children as best as possible. Even with the best protocols in place, we certainly understand, unfortunately, just as we see sexual assaults happen in our community, they unfortunately may happen in our schools as well. We try and do everything we can to avoid them, and I know that the school system is committed to that goal as well. I think the key here is in how we react, how we make sure that we get better, and how we ensure that we're notifying the public and ensuring that those folks who are impacted feel supported and have the best resources that they're given to get through these horrific incidents. And so we previously held a work session to talk about workplace harassment and child abuse and neglect, and I think that was back in 2018. And then and that I think was a joint committee meeting. Then we had with public safety in 2019, where we were talking about some of the child abuse and neglect policies and procedures as well. So wanted to give an opportunity for my colleagues, and I see Councilmember Navarro. I'll just see if she has any opening statements or remarks, and then with Councilmember Duando, turn to him, and then turn to staff to kind of walk us through, and then to MCPS. So Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice, and thank you for scheduling this item. I am looking forward to the conversation with the MCPS representatives, and I think that you framed it very well. This is an issue that we wish we never had to deal with. It is a very serious issue. It is of great concern, especially as parents. When we send our precious children to school, we want to make sure that they are protected and that they don't have to face these kinds of circumstances. And so I know that I can speak for someone whose both daughters went through MCPS, that our parents need to be able to understand what are the processes, what have been some of the particular policies or procedures that have been put in place. I particularly also want to hear about how do we address issues of language barriers, cultural issues. I know my office has facilitated some of those types of situations. So important to make sure that obviously if family is going through something like this, that the school system does have that kind of capacity, because communication is so key and supports are so key. So there's just a very, broad, number of issues that we need to understand and address. And I, again, applaud MCPS representatives for constantly working on this. This is, again, I think it's important to say that I know that for the MCPS leadership and the Board of Education, this is a priority. It's the number one priority. And I think it's important for us to know, again, what are some of those other ways that these issues have been addressed, and what else can we do to support the work of the school system in this arena. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Councilmember Navarro, you brought about a very good point, and I'm sure we'll have it as part of our discussion dealing with cultural competency and making sure that we're doing our best to reach out to our communities when it comes to some of the language challenges that we may have, and just ensuring that that's there. But also, social media and another part that hasn't been as big as it is now, that really rules the roost when it comes to a lot of the issues that we see in our schools between our children. And so that's one where I'm very anxious to hear about what MCPS is doing, what their thoughts and processes are to ensure our children's safety. Let me turn to Mr. Howard and Ms. Rodriguez to go ahead and walk us through, and then turn it over to our guests for their presentation.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Rice, and both you and Councilmember Navarro have really set up the purpose and background for this discussion very well. MCPS has prepared a presentation to walk the committee through based on four kind of groups of questions or discussion areas that the staff sent them ahead of time. So I won't go through those because they'll address those as part of their presentation, but cover some of the things that you both mentioned as part of the introduction. And then we also included some background materials and information that MCPS provides on its website, regulations that the board has adopted around different policies and procedures, as well as some communications that the superintendent and MCPS staff have provided to the school community after incidents or allegations of incidents have occurred in recent months. So unless there's any additional questions that you all have right now, I would recommend that we turn it over to MCPS to walk through their presentation, and then open it up to discussion on all the different issues and areas.
Excellent. Well, I see that Councilmember Juando has joined us. Did you have any opening remarks, Councilmember Juando, before we jump in? Okay. All right. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
So thank you, Councilmember Rice and Navarro and Juando for joining us this afternoon. And we are happy to come before the Education and Culture Committee to talk about some recent incidents, and also to talk about ways in which MCPS is trying to mitigate these issues and other issues. As you mentioned previously in your comments, Councilmember Rice, MCPS has been before the Education and Culture Committee previously over the last 2 years to address primarily child abuse and neglect issues. And normally it's done in March of the past 2 years, but of course, as you know, we weren't able to come before you in March of this year because of our health crisis. However, we gladly accept the opportunity to discuss the recent developments that have occurred through social media. And you brought that up, Councilmember Rice. Social media has just taken on a whole new culture. And while some people may not be as familiar with social media as others, I think this is a point in time when we all need to be very familiar with it, because it's, as you said, it's really out there, it's before us, and we need to be prepared to react in a very timely manner and with appropriate information. Thank you for introducing my colleagues who are joining me today. Both Greg Edmondson, who is the Director of Student Wellness and Compliance, and Mr. Ed Clark, who is the Director of System-Wide Safety and Emergency Management for MCPS, both fall under my supervision and my oversight as the Chief of Staff. So it made sense for me to come before you today to present this information, to have discussion, and to address your questions. And as you mentioned earlier, both Dr. Smith and Dr. McKnight were unable, because of scheduling conflicts, to join you. So we are here to proceed on. So Mr. Howard already introduced the briefing items basically before you. Mr. Howard, is someone going to manipulate our PowerPoint?
You have the ability to share your screen. I also have the PowerPoint, and I can put it up on. I can share my screen if that would be easiest for you.
That would probably be easiest for us.
Okay. Let me hold on 1 second. Let me pull that up. trying to expand this. Hold on one second. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Good? Okay.
Yes.
Good to go.
Okay. So, Dr. Johnson, just tell me when to scroll down.
Well, we'd like to start off with the briefing items right there. And so you have given us 4 charges for our discussion today to talk about the efforts of MCPS to deal with those issues that were involving social media accounts that took place in June, and what are the processes and procedures that we use, as well as disciplinary action when an allegation is found to be factual, and how do we make sure that there is very little, if no, interaction between the perpetrator and the victim when an incident like this is founded. And then how quickly and in what manner do we share our information with the parent community and with our elected officials. So if we could go on to the next slide, I'm going to ask Mr. Edmondson to provide our council members with a background around the social media allegations from June.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johnson, and thank you for this opportunity from the County Council to be able to share the work and the overview of many of the questions and the information that you've asked us for. So we do appreciate this time. Yes, they are very serious, and yes, we are extremely committed. So Councilmember Rice and Councilmember Navarro, thank you very much for that lead in. As you, I'm sure you're aware, we received multiple reports to our schools from students, some from families, with regards to the various social media platforms that were, and allegations that were being posted through these social media platforms brought to us by students, and really looking at how we needed to investigate quickly, and we continue to investigate on that. We decided to formulate, Ed Clark and Natalia on together, Dr. Johnson's lead, to make sure that we were taking each and every single, not only post that was brought into our schools through our principals or through emails as seriously as we possibly could. And we began to investigate. We're continuing to investigate each one of these leads as we speak. We're finding that the majority of these incidents involve high school students, which are describing conduct that's happening outside of anything that might have happened in the school. But we're also looking at any of the allegations that happened within the school, and we are finding that the significant majority of them have been reported, investigated, and addressed as appropriate and as necessary. Another thing that we're finding with regards to these allegations and these posts on social media is that many of them are anonymous, and we don't have names of alleged victims. We don't have names of offenders. And the ones that we do have, we're looking into and contacting our school directors and our school principals and trying to assess each situation individually and figure out as much information as we can on each of the situations. It is difficult to quantify exactly the number of posts. Some of them are coming in as maybe multiple posts about the same scenario or the same incident that's being described. So we are in the process of trying to figure out exactly which schools are involved and which students we might have names to be able to put to these incidents and allegations. If you can click to the next slide, please. So we formed 4 core teams with regards to this work. We have an investigations team that's led by Ed Clark, as introduced earlier. We have a communications team that we work through our Public Information Office, and our student support team, which is led through our Office of Student Family Engagement. Whereas if we do have a name of a victim or an alleged victim or an alleged offender, we are deciding on what type of mental health supports they might need, whether or not we need to involve child abuse and neglect offices or any type of supports that that family or that student might need with regards to the allegation. And then we have a legal team is led by Natalia Ahn, who is providing us with guidance through this work. If you could just slide to the next slide, please. This just gives you a little bit more detail about the various offices that have been involved in coming together as a team. We are meeting, if not daily, with smaller groups of the team, of the project team, but also we're meeting regularly every other day or every third day to update each of these different, update the whole team on where each of these different teams are working and what they're finding and what they're learning. We do have policies, as you're well aware, the Board of Education policy, ACF, which is our sexual harassment policy. It does define sexual harassment. It establishes the complaint resolution procedures, establishes the responsibility of which staff might be involved to implement the policy. And then within that policy, we have a regulation which spells out for our schools and for our MCPS employees the procedures and the steps that need to be filed with regards to Title IX laws, but also to make sure that we are responding back to our families and making sure we have supports in place and that we are continuing to monitor the situation. Thank you. So anytime we have any type of report or an allegation, or even if we as staff in the buildings or even on our calls, our virtual learning, where we recognize or or feel that there is any type of inappropriate behavior going on, staff are trained annually to make sure that they know what those proper steps for reporting are. This training is a part of our district-wide compliance training, which we have the expectation that every one of our 23,000 employees plus 5,000 substitute teachers all go through this training. It includes bullying, harassment, intimidation, and also it includes our sexual harassment and assault recognizing reporting protocols. So students have many options with regards to sharing this information. They can share it verbally, they can share it in writing. We remind our students, and we, through our personal body safety lessons, as we shared with you before with child abuse and neglect, but also through our counseling department and our lessons that the counselors provide for our students, pre-K to 12, we remind them of the trusted adults that are in the building that they may have. We remind them that there's a counselor available and is trained on these processes. We also have a child abuse and neglect / Title IX a liaison in every building that we've trained. So the students have multiple and various options in order to share this information with our staff. We also have a Title IX Dropbox where if someone's not as comfortable sharing with someone within the building or even want to submit it anonymously, they can send any information through our Title IX Dropbox. And our staff have bullying forms. It's our Form 230-35 and our 230-36, which is the response form that we provide back whenever we receive these forms at the conclusion of an investigation to the reporter. But each of these forms and protocols have been a part of our training for several years. The administrator within the school investigates and completes these forms, and through our Title IX protocols, must respond back to our families in writing. And so over the course of the last several years, we've had many complaints or allegations, and I'm very pleased I know that these things come up through social media, and it tends to might give us a perspective that protocols aren't in place, but I'm really pleased, and as the director of student welfare, I'm really pleased to be able to share that our schools have a great grasp on following these protocols. Every single incident that comes into OSSI, we follow up individually with our principals, and we make sure that these procedures are followed, and we monitor those procedures from this office back to the principal and back through the OSSI director, which is our school support improvement teams. But we do have incidents like this will come up, and then through social media, and they start to layer upon themselves, and that's where we're finding ourselves today. That we have to make sure that each and every one of these allegations does not get lost through the work. And then we do have student code of conducts that all of our students are aware of, where any student who violates the policy ACF on sexual harassment is subject to disciplinary action and possibly suspension and expulsion through that code of conduct. So we work very closely with our schools and our principals and administrators to make sure that side of the work is being addressed appropriately as well.
So there are also interim measures that we take whenever there's a situation or an allegation that is brought before us. So we call it a safety plan. A safety plan is put in place pending the investigation. School administrators, counselors, our cluster coordinators, they sometimes have to work very closely with students and parents to develop this individualized safety plan. Our key here is to make sure that the student can remain in his or her building, in his or her classroom, in the safest environment possible. So we want to maintain reasonable and necessary measures so the students can not only proceed with their classroom activities, but if they're participating in after-school activities, extracurricular activities, or athletics, that they can do so in a safe manner as well. Each of the safety plans is based upon facts and circumstances, and in some cases it has become necessary for us to separate the students at the request of the victim most of the time, or in some cases at the request of the offender, the alleged offender, including administrative placement from one school to another. And we do take the time to adjust and modify those safety plans as warranted, depending upon how the student feels or his or her parents feel about the situation. So in addressing briefing item number 3, we try to make sure that there is contact avoidance between the victim and the offender whenever possible, particularly at school. With the help of our security staff and our administrators, we're able to do that. And then we hope then that if there is any type of interaction that takes place outside of school, that the students will come in and let their administrator know so that we can help deal with those issues outside of the school day. As far as communication is concerned, the Office of the Chief of Staff, my office, communicates with our external stakeholders and our partners in making sure that the information they receive is accurate and is available. Our communications team provides that information to our public, and then I provide the information to members of the Board of Education, County Council, and elected officials. One of the things that I think that this administration under Dr. Smith has tried to do, and I think we've done a very good job of, is making sure that the various community and county agencies or officials within Montgomery County are aware of these situations and this information, particularly if we know it's going to be a media event or if it's going to hit the news. We think it's important that you as members, as elected officials, know about this information in advance. So we do make a concerted effort to provide you with that information when possible, so that if you get comments, questions from your constituents, that you are knowledgeable enough to be able to refer them to us or to be able to address just basic cursory questions that may be asked. The decisions around communicating the information and notification to the school community are based upon several factors. Whether or not the communication is in the best interest of the student. We want to make sure that we're not violating FERPA guidelines. And we want to make sure that the information that we provide to the community does not interfere with an ongoing investigation. I think it's important for us to note here that whenever there is an alleged violation or incident, it takes a bifurcated approach. There's an investigation that is done by us, primarily by Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Clark's offices, as well as, if necessary, and we have to get law enforcement involved, they take a separate approach to the work. While we do work together under memorandums of understanding, it's important to note that there are two different bodies that are working on these cases depending upon how the cases are viewed. If there's criminal intent or criminal action, law enforcement takes that. If it's disciplinary from the school standpoint, then we address that. But they're really two separate investigations that are going on at the same time. And with that, we stand ready to address questions from council members or comments.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I am going to let my colleagues go first because I have a number of different questions. So let me turn to Councilmember Navarro, followed by Councilmember DeWanda.
Thank you so much. So there are, of course, a lot of questions regarding this, but one of the things that keeps coming to mind are the efforts that we have put in place to provide supports for especially our most vulnerable students, investments that we've made that can be considered to be close to what we would deem to recognize as community schools, for example. So we have made investments in other kinds of programs, support programs, either the wellness centers, other kinds of just wraparound services, et cetera. And it would be interesting to know, and I don't know if you've been able to figure that out, but how do these programs help? You know, do you find that, and especially I keep thinking about, you know, students who may not feel confident or maybe intimidated to reach out to the school leadership, but if they are participating in these other kinds of positive youth development programs that are contained in the schools, does that allow for more trust, or does it also allow for more support that perhaps serves as a buffer for these kinds of issues, especially when you start putting in there, what we've said before, this element of social media that is just so difficult to control. So I'm wondering if the school system has done any kind of assessment or looked at the role that these other types of services and supports play in mitigating that impact and supporting students and just kind of intervening vis-a-vis, you know, the elements of social media and other issues.
So I can say that, you know, as a former high school principal in Montgomery County and at a high school where there was a wellness center, you're absolutely right, Councilmember Navarro. There is a lot of trust from those outside, given to those outside agencies in working with students. And students do provide them with information that they probably would not provide me as a principal or even a counselor. And so because they're working in our schools, however, we depend upon them to let us know about information that we can follow up on. And of course, confidentiality for many of these students is very important. So we can do that, and we can start an investigation into a particular situation or a particular matter and holding the information in confidence coming from those organizations. You bring up a very good point. I don't know that there has ever been any type of analysis around the data that's received by those outside groups and how we would use that particular data or how we capture that data. That's a very good point, and I think that's information that we need to take back, and Mr. Edmondson and his office, colleagues can take that information back and begin to look at some of those various organizations that are working with our students to determine their viewpoint on things, to see if there's anything that we can glean from the information we receive from them that can be very helpful in either our processes, our protocols, or trying to work with those families in maintaining the safety and security of their children.
Thank you. I appreciate that because, again, I think that especially, you know, And so we always say we just have to follow the numbers. And when you look at the makeup of our school system, there is no doubt that we need to figure out very many different ways to provide support to our students and families. And especially if you have a situation where you might have a family, who may not, for example, speak English very well, or maybe is really overwhelmed by, how you navigate the system, etc. I think that recognizing that we have assets that we have created, such as these kinds of programs, finding ways to leverage those whenever we may have circumstances arising, right? So, we still have the challenge that in many of our schools, we don't have bilingual staff, for example, that could provide that kind of support. And, and it's not just obviously translating it, but also providing a almost a customer service perspective where there's also that empathy and that, almost social worker, kind of psychologist type of support to make a family feel, comfortable as you're going through something like this. I believe that that's still a challenge for us. I'll be honest, there are times when I'm surprised that there are particular schools that don't have, for example, bilingual staff that can provide that as a support. I do understand that we're a very large school system, so it's, we're working towards that, but I know we're not there yet. So I just offer that as part of that analysis, perhaps we also seek to understand, where we might have those resources and how may we connect that to schools that may not have that capacity, but that they're aware that they could perhaps, reach out to a particular office or a particular whatever it is to find it. I think that we need to do whatever we can to do that, because one thing are the cases that we may know about, but the other issue that, of course, worries me is all the families or students who might feel so intimidated that may not even be sharing what's happening, and that's always difficult. And again, it's amplified by the issue of social media. So we really look forward to that kind of data, and it also helps us on the council because every year we're doing whatever we can with limited resources, trying to figure out how to strengthen many of these programs. So it's great to know the impact that perhaps these programs are also having in issues like these. It really does inform our decision making when it comes to budgets and things like that.
So one of the things that I would charge our group with doing, because you bring up a very good point, is going back to particularly our middle schools and our high schools, where we have the preponderance of these issues, these Title IX and child abuse and neglect issues, and seeking data around how many folks who are bilingual are actually in those schools and how those folks are being used around this particular issue. So we will follow up with that, and we'll come back and provide you with some information, because Greg has a Title IX and a child abuse and neglect coordinator in every single school. It would be interesting to see of those people how many of them are bilingual, and if they're not, who do they go to in their schools to be able to work with students who may not feel comfortable coming to them directly, or may not be as comfortable with the language as they could be, and therefore they need someone else to help. So that's a challenge for us, and we'll take that back and we'll provide you with that data, with that information.
Thank you.
If I could just add very quickly, bring up a great point about how we have to be tighter with that organization and we have to be improved with that data. And when you started your question, I was thinking about the second level after we have a situation, and when we work with, I just wanted to mention that we have great partnerships with Treehouse and with victims assistance programs and with Safe Schools. In our Office of Student and Family Supports and Engagement with Dr. Rathbone and Dr. Connolly and Dr. Cruz, great communications are going on from that side of it, which means we've already had an incident and we're able to really tighten up what type of follow-up supports a student may need or a family may need. But I'm hearing what you're saying is even on the front end, for them to be able to have those relationships before an incident happens, that they know what to do is something we definitely want to look into more closely. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that, as you all know, the Street Outreach Network, some of our community-based organizations that have been doing the work in the wellness centers, et cetera, are great partners. And I know that they're already doing it, but I think they'll be great and in a way that we can bring it all together with that focus as well on a proactive fashion. That would be, I think, super helpful. Thank you.
And just one more piece of our training that's happening actually tomorrow and last week is instead of just training our counselors, we've invited all of our members of the bilingual assessment teams, all of our members of our ESOL program into these trainings, and we've made them required trainings for the summer. So we are making sure that the trainings that we've provided our Title IX liaisons, the same training with all of our ESOL teacher leaders and all of our bilingual assessment team people. So because we understand that is a definite need.
Awesome.
Councilmember Navarro, the committee chair seems to have stepped away, maybe by technology issues. So, if you or Councilmember Jawando want to take over until he returns.
I won't take over. I'll just start asking my questions. I think I was next anyway, right?
He was next. Yes.
Hopefully, Zoom returns him back to us at some point. Thank you for the information and the briefing, Dr. Johnson, and to the whole entire team, Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Clark and Miss An. Is it An? Did I say that right? Okay, good. Thank you. So obviously, this is a huge issue. I have a couple of broad questions and then a couple specific questions related to the social media, the recent information that's been reported in the press and obviously happened at many of our high schools and some of our middle schools. We know that, this is a big issue. Most students, unfortunately, are experiencing sexual assault prior to being 18, those that do experience sexual assault. So, I think some of the data that we're probably all familiar with, 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 5 to 7 boys are sexually assaulted prior to leaving high school, unfortunately. And that's, as of a couple of years ago, the information. And so we know this is a huge issue. I guess my baseline question will be, when I saw all the floods come in, these hundreds of messages, do we have the capacity at every level from the, and I know part of the answer to this question, unfortunately, but from the counselor level to the investigatory level, to the, administrative side of being able to actually go in and look at all these cases, do we have the right tools and resources and capacity in place to address numbers as they're coming in? And so that could be I know not all of these people who are assaulted report. Obviously, that's a challenge too. But of what's being reported, what's the capacity like? If someone could speak to that question, in your view.
I can start, and then I'll ask Mr. Edmondson to follow up. When these issues started coming in on social media, Councilman Jawando, we immediately started our investigation and started our work. Unfortunately, many of the cases that came out through social media were anonymous. We could not attach a student with an offender, but the ones where we were able to do that, Mr. Clark is working with SVID and Child Protective Services on those issues, and we have started to do our investigation for all of the ones that we can identify and the ones that are coming in. In a normal situation, I would also say yes to that question, because normally when something is reported to a principal or a form is filled out, it goes directly to Mr. Edmondson's office. He follows up with the principal immediately and takes them through the protocols that need to take place as part of the investigation. So I'll let him address exactly how that's handled and what goes on, and how he's handling the cases that have come in since June.
Right. Thank you. Yes. So, on a normal circumstance, they come in. Anytime there's an incident, whether it's something of hate bias, whether it's a safety issue with a fire incident, alarm goes off, they call into OSSI and a report is generated, and our office receives all of those reports. We're responsible for making sure we're reading the details, and even if it's not categorized as a disruptive behavior of a sexual nature or inappropriate touching, we're going to follow up on any of those with the principal. So we do have protocols, and we certainly have the capacity to handle that, and we've handled it very well over the last several years. This is obviously when you receive all the social media posts that we received, and principals and others are getting emails, and parents are saying what's going on about this, and then MC Media. I mean, everybody knows what happened in late June and early July, and it's continuing to come in.
That was going to be my other question. If you could wrap in, I know Dr. Johnson, Principal Johnson at Blair, in her message said if you have other reports, email this address. I was going to ask what has come in since then, because I imagine that would encourage maybe some people to report.
And it has encouraged some people to report. We've received, half a dozen entries from that since those letters from Dr. Smith went out. But again, from our normal circumstance to now, we may not have the capacity until we pull a team together and we divide it into 4 teams of communication and investigation. And we're meeting every other day with about 30 people. So now we do have the capacity. So we were able to reshift how we're handling these things because, like I said earlier, we want to make sure that every single one of these posts or just they're not all allegations. They're just kind of people complaining about what they've been through in the past. We wanted to make sure that every single one of those was addressed appropriately. And like I alluded to, the vast majority of these we went back to our database. They've already been reported. They've already been filed and handled with the families and with any possible disciplinary measures. So we're really trying to decipher that. And that's the work that's going on right now with Mr. Clark's team. And he and his investigators who are trained in this area are doing a great job with that. So, yes, we do have the capacity. It's just definitely been an adjustment with this where we're at right now.
Sure. And then my second question was, I think, and then Mr. Clark, you can chime in on that if you wanted to as well, but was going to be the relationship with the police department, your investigation in the police department, and how you're handling that. And are there clear lines, protocols, and where can people find those? If as a parent, I want to go and see where do police pick up and where does your office pick up? Because that's some of the questions I've gotten is, is it better to go to MCPS and or go to the police directly or not tell MCPS? There's been some debate about that. And so if you could just speak to the relationship and how you conduct those investigations on that same timeline.
Absolutely. Be glad to kind of give you an overview of where we are. As Dr. Johnson said, there's that bifurcated process. So if there's a complaint that comes into the principal or social media through Mr. Edmondson's office, we'll look at those, we'll evaluate those. We want to make sure that we're doing a thorough job of really trying to determine who the victims may be, who the alleged offenders may be as well, and then decide where to go. Does it stay within the MCPS administrative track, working with our school administrators, our counselors, Mr. Edmondson's Title IX team, or does it rise to the level where we need to coordinate with SVID, Captain Dom, and her team? Clearly, if there's an allegation of any rape, sexual assault by force, those are they go over to local law enforcement for investigation. As Dr. Johnson said, that doesn't mean that we completely stand down, but they take over. And what we do, Councilmember Jawanda, is we follow the guidelines and protocols in the MOU with local law enforcement that deals with SROs and any school-based incidents where the police department takes over priority. So that's a document that is available to the public, both on our website here as well as the Montgomery County Police Department. So again, we're very careful about FERPA, but when we need to share that information with Captain Dom, we'll do so. And then we stand down. We do not want to compromise their criminal investigation. We will assist as needed and as appropriate under those guidelines. But again, we want to take all these concerns, or we do take all these concerns very seriously. We want to make sure the due process is there for not only the victim, but for the alleged perpetrators. And when we can identify the need for supporting services, either within the MCPS family or external resources, we want to make sure those resources are provided to those victims and families as well. So that's how we sort of take a look at this. We're also looking for any patterns or trends that we can kind of take a step back and say we need to make some improvements depending on the climate and culture that we may, discover at different schools, and how we can do a better job collectively being very responsive to any type of allegation that comes in.
I appreciate that. And one of the things that, to Councilmember Navarro's point, the easier we can make it to report in the more ways and languages and kind of on-ramps. I know some jurisdictions have used mobile apps. I just think we need to have as easy a process for people to report on any level, parent, teacher, student, bystander. And I just think we want to consider that. And when I saw a report about the mobile app thing, and if we can incorporate it even into current online technology, some of the things that students are already using, and there's a button. I just think when you look at those numbers, and as how many students experience this, I think there's obviously an issue of underreporting. And so we need to try to figure out ways to deconstruct that. And I want to commend our system, because I know we're, having children at different ages. I know about, who's a trusted adult, what are your body. I've seen, I'm starting to see, and I know Council members Rice and Navarro have seen this too at various stages of the training and the curriculum that comes through. But I just think we just got to continually push on this, because it's such a huge issue. And the last question I have, and I'll stop for now, is, have we done, climate surveys based on gender-based harassment and of students and or faculty and staff? Has there been a climate survey done related to these issues? And if so, when? And if not, are we contemplating it? And if not, can we? That would be a kind of a three-part question.
So the first answer to your question is no, we've not done any type of a climate survey around these types of issues. Our climate survey has primarily been centered on and around the school climate and the school environment. As you know, there is a climate survey that's administered by the state. That climate survey asks questions about the environment of the school and the teachers and so forth, and it does not address this particular issue. That survey is not only administered to staff in the building, but it's also administered to students. This year, we did not administer a climate survey because of the fact that the Maryland State Department of Education was debuting their climate survey for the first time, and we didn't want there to be any type of confusion between what we would administer and what the state is administering, because they're using it as a part of their school grading and part of their report card process. You bring up a very good point. No, we have not done that, but it's certainly something that we could look into, particularly for our students, and that would probably give us some information. It's not going to give us personal information because it's anonymous, but it will give us information about, like you said, how many students may have encountered this, 1 in 3, 1 in 7, and what can we do differently in order to support these students and work with these students around these issues. So we'll take that one back. So I've got one from Councilmember Navarro, I've got one from you, and we'll take those back and we'll look at what we can do, because that's a very good suggestion. And no, we have not done anything like that in the past, but we can look into it, definitely.
If I could just add on to that, because 6 months ago when we revised our hate bias protocols, our equity team did a great job of developing a needs assessment around hate bias and figuring out where it's happening in the schools, figuring out where it's happening with regards to demographic groups, and really we're asking principals to really look at where they are with regards to hate bias. And the equity team, as well as with other groups and other offices, are currently in the process of developing a student module. Like, we train our staff every year, but we want to develop a student module for all of our students to be able to take early in the school year that brings up these issues. But also, I'm certainly looking at a possibility of including some of that climate survey response back with regards to that module. This is a big point, especially personally for me, where we look at culture shifts. If you think about 5 years ago, when we had the child abuse and neglect underreporting, and we went through the failure to reports, that the laws that came out, and I feel like the district did such a great job in working with Child Protective Services and the state's attorney to really change the culture of child abuse and neglect. There's absolutely no questions now about when we need to report. We have an online form. We have everything that's a part of that work. We have to take this through in my opinion, and we've talked with Dr. Johnson and others, we have to take this issue through the same type of culture shift so that, we had so many conversations about, well, if you err on the side of reporting, then just report. Like, if we're unsure, we report. We have to have that same urgency within not only our employees, but within our community to make sure that we're looking into these things from the get-go, even if we might even suspect before something even happened, like we did with child abuse and neglect. We take them through scenarios. So that culture and climate piece is at the forefront of our work. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
No, I appreciate it. And that was the first thing that when I saw those hundreds of messages, I said, man, you imagine students will be honest on something like this that impacts so many students. If we ask them in an anonymous way and make it easy, I think you're going to get not only numbers and prevalence, but also suggestions potentially about, how to move forward. So, and who the trusted adults are, et cetera. So thank you very much. I'm glad that we can.
Student leadership. We have a student leadership program, and we're going to have in September a let's talk about respect town hall for all of our kids to talk about this issue, and it will be run by, and the agenda will be developed by our students. And so that's a really big piece to this as well. And that helps shift culture too, when the kids know that their voices are being heard, and not just being heard, but they're driving the conversation. So
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I was in frozen land for a moment there, so I apologize. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro, for taking over for me. So part of my concern, Dr. Johnson, centers around a word that you've used over and over again, which I think, again, isn't purposeful, but I think has its own connotation. You've used the word investigate in the context of MCPS. And certainly when a person is alleging that they've had some sort of sexual assault, what you'll hear from a lot of advocates in the community is that MCPS should not be investigating something like that. That should be the police's job to do. Now, again, I know information gathering, fact gathering, getting all the information, those kinds of things are incredibly important. This may involve Ms. An as well. So, Ms. An, we may actually have something for you here. In terms of what is exactly, so I want to make sure for, as Councilmember Joando says, for the millions that are watching at home, what is the role of MCPS when it comes to an alleged sexual assault? What is the role in terms of fact gathering, information gathering? Their responsibility, obviously, we all know, it is to call the police and make sure it's reported to the police. But what else goes on in that context? If you can help me to understand.
Sure. And since you called on Ms. An, I'm going to let her take that question.
I'd be happy to. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Natalia An. I don't think I've met many of you before, so I just want to introduce myself to the group. And I'm glad that you've asked me the question because, as you know, the lawyers often tend to live in the gray and not in the black and the white. And so I see this question as very much living in that gray area because when community members hear sexual assault or when they hear investigation, I think they're thinking black and white very often. And so when you hear sexual assault, I think it's easy to jump to that non-consensual rape situation. A sexual assault can be anything where it is an unwanted touching between two students. So a sexual assault in MCPS could be two third graders playing and one may allege that the other one touched their buttocks. They could be two 10th graders alleging that they were in a romantic relationship, but on their way home in a school bus, one kissed the other without the other one really wanting that to happen. And so when we talk about sexual harassment and we talk about sexual assault, we really got to keep in mind that that encompasses a very wide range of behavior. And as a school system, where it is very much our duty to investigate and look into these allegations, because some of them may be an assault where it's very much either black or white, and we know immediately those are the easy cases, right? Because we can say we're going to pick up the phone, we're going to call the police. We're talking about things that happen between students who may be showing a manifestation of a disability that they have. They may have sensory processing issues. They may have the need or themselves going through puberty and find themselves having an interest in touching a girl's thigh, but it's really a manifestation of a disability. So it's a really, really complex area of the law. But when we say investigate, we don't mean investigate for criminal prosecution. We mean what is going on here, because it's our duty to take care of kids. It's not just our duty to take care of any alleged victims. Of course, that's a priority, but also alleged offenders. As we all know, a lot of men and women that are the ones doing the assaulting have been assaulted themselves. So I think you have to be very, very conscientious when you're dealing with these things. And I don't think we'd be doing our job right if we just said we're picking up the phone and calling the police. We've got to look into what is the student's history. Let's talk to their families. Let's see what's going on. Is this something that is a misunderstanding? Is this something that's a little bit more than that? And I think we as a school system are very well equipped. We know these students pretty well, having worked with them. And I think it's a dangerous thing to say, I'm going to turn this over immediately to police without saying, well, by the way, this child has an IEP, this child has this disorder and that disorder. So I think we provide a whole lot of context to what may be more gray than black and white. And I think we do a really great job and play a pivotal role in those investigations.
So thank you. That's an excellent answer, Ms. An. And so it brings me to my next one, which is who conducts that and under what guidance? Because so as I heard from Councilmember Navarro earlier, in terms of some of her remarks talking about how it's important for the leader of the school, the principal, to guide in such a way. We all know that in analyzing all of us, we all have implicit bias. And so there are always concerns about, especially when it comes to our LGBTQIA plus community, and some challenges that may exist there. What are the procedures? Are those procedures drawn out in black and white in terms of what they're supposed to do as a part of their, and I'll use the air quotes around investigatory procedures, because to me, still investigate means something in the area, as you know, in law for that is more black and white than it is about information gathering and fact finding. But so putting that aside, are there structures that are in place that determine this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do? Are there forms that are filled out? Walk me through that part of the process as well.
So there are forms that are filled out when we have an incident that's been reported, and the first line of communication, of course, is at the administrative level in the school with the principal. Rarely, just so that you know, I mean, I think this is just a given in most of our schools. If it is a female student, more than likely the conversation will be held by a female administrator. We don't have male administrators having conversations like this with female students. If it's a situation, more than likely it will be a male administrator who's having the conversation. So we're very aware of the fact that students feel comfortable having conversations of a personal nature with people that are like them, either the same sex or they can understand it. One of the things that we have been trying to do under the leadership of Mr. Edmondson is to make all of our staff aware of the LGBTQ plus issues that our students are dealing with. So our hope is that any administrator, whether they're male or female, could address, or any staff member in the building could work with students to address those issues and to make sure that they put them in contact with the appropriate people. One of the things that we don't have specifically, and I think this is what you're asking for, Councilmember Rice, is a step-by-step process of what should happen, what should occur, what the question should be, that sort of thing. And I would have to defer to Ms. Ahn on this. I don't know if that's something that we would want to create or want to have. I don't know, Ms. Ahn, what's your thinking around that? I know that we don't have it right now.
Before Ms. Ahn replies, let me just give you a scenario of why something like this may be appropriate. And again, it ties back to my work with your current bullying policy, which you know was something that I worked on at the state level. That was my bill that's passed that now in the state of Maryland mandates that everyone has a bullying, harassment, intimidation policy. So I am one who errs on the side of having all of this strictly annotated. So one principal says, listen, I wanted to understand what happened, and they're asking this person a question, and they say, so, you know, was it that you and such were in a relationship, and that's the reason why they touched you? Or the other person says, I understand that this is the case, and that, you know, this person touched you. You're already leading into, in one of those lines of questioning, an excuse for why it happened, which already frustrates the victim. In the other case, it's just fact-finding information. And it's a part of, again, what our implicit bias is in a lot of these cases. If you know that, and this is relationships with folks too, right? So it plays on both sides, so where it's a positive and a negative. If you have a young man who's always with a girlfriend every single time, and, you know, so it's like that you always see them with a girl, always doing whatever, you tend to think that, well, that person's always with the girl, always whatever, so you're automatically going to assume that person is that kind of way, instead of just keeping it to straight, what are the facts right here, right now. And so from that perspective, that's why, again, I'll just lead into what before Ms. Ahn replies, that I would think that it would be better to have specific questioning versus having something that's just left up to folks in terms of their own judgment call. So, Ms. Ahn.
Thank you. So Greg is probably going to be the best to speak to the exact steps that go into the investigation. His office puts on fantastic training year-round to administrators and counselors, and we make certain that the folks that engage in those types of investigations are trained, and that it's not just any employee in a school that is conducting that interview. And I think that there's always there's room for guidance that is well drawn out, as you said, and well itemized. I tend to err on a different side, I think, of the coin when we talk about conversing with students, with juveniles about relationships. I think one of the key and critical tasks that I think I have every day as counsel for a school system is how not just to give advice, but how to give actionable and implementable advice. So I think that we have to be cognizant to not say you need to ask these 4 questions, because we want to leave room for that follow-up. We want to leave room for that narrative. So I think that Greg's office does a good job of guiding the type of information that needs to be sought. I don't know that I would necessarily advise an exact format of questions, but I think you're absolutely right that itemizing the topics that will certainly need to be addressed is an important piece of this, and I can, hand it over to Greg, who can give you those details.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have draft investigative plans and protocols. We take I mentioned the training, our administrators, our liaisons, our counselors, and part of that training does include guidance and guidelines around steps that need to be taken for a proper investigation. And we've consulted through, Ed Clark's office and our school security supervisors who work with our schools much more directly. But what Dr. Johnson is correct that we have not formulated that into an expected protocol as part of our policy. So we have guidance and we have investigative plans and we have safety plans that are very structured and quite explicit with regards to these are the step-by-step questions that will help you remain objective in this process. We actually even mentioned implicit bias as part of our investigative plan. So, but it has not been, again, to Dr. Johnson's point, it is not written in our policy. And so we're getting it out to our principals, we're getting it out to our schools. But you're absolutely right. We have to tighten that up as part of, like you said, the annotated piece of it, which is extremely important.
And the only reason why I say it is because, look, the reason why, well, I should say the reason, but one of the challenges we had with this most recent situation was that folks had alleged that different people were treating the situations differently, i.e. administrators were treating it differently. And so, obviously, from that point alone, it would behoove us to try and keep that consistency amongst all to where everyone follows the same sort of guidelines and process, and then no one will allege. You might disagree with the process, but that's a whole other thing from then, well, this person handled it this way and this person handled it that way, right? Because that's not what we want in a system, because then what will then happen, even though it might not be true, is that folks will allege that some allow a culture to exist while others are good about stamping out that culture. That's the next step after that, right? And that's what we all want to try and avoid. And so I think, again, whatever that looks like in context, I'm not prescriptive in terms of what that is, but as long as that consistency is maintained amongst all of our schools, with all of our leadership, I think that we then stave off that conversation that surrounds sort of inequities in terms of how these situations are treated in the various schools.
So, like you said earlier,
Member Rice, could I add something here?
Please.
Sir, I'm a former child sexual abuse investigator when I was with the county police department. So what we try to do working with Greg, our school security staff, our school administrators is really, as you mentioned, follow the facts. Look at who, what, where, why, when, and how, and follow those. Those will lead us where we go. The other thing I want to say, when I came back to MCPS, one of the great things that we have in place when we have these type of very serious concerns, we will get on an internal, what we call a huddle call, where we bring all the involved parties together and really go through the factual patterns here and say, did we miss anything? That is a national best practice that this school system has developed. We use it frequently. So when we have these questions, we'll get on these type of calls with the school-based leadership, general counsel's office, Mr. Evans' team, performance directors. We just talk through these things to make sure we've got everything in place. We'll talk about those safety plans. We'll talk about the need. This rise to a level where we are mandated to turn this over to SVID. So that has really been a very, very helpful process that this school system continues to employ as needed.
Thank you for that, Mr. Clark. I really appreciate that. Mr. Johnson, you look like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was, and I think one of the things that, as Mr. Edmondson mentioned previously in his comments, is, in September there will be this student town hall forum, and it looks like the students have decided that they want to empower themselves. They want to be engaged. So I think going forward, what we're going to see are more students involved, more students feeling comfortable, and more students speaking out if they have had a situation in which they've let someone know about their particular allegation and they feel as though nothing has been done. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do is to make sure that we provide them with that ability to be able to take that next step and to be able to say, well, you didn't listen to me or you didn't hear me, so therefore I'm going to go to the next level and talk with someone else. And I think Shella Cherry and her group that works with her on student leadership, my hope, and I think she's already gotten this as a part of her program, is to really help students to become more empowered and more emboldened to be able to move forward to the very end to make sure that someone hears them and that someone is listening to them.
So let me just close with my last question, which is around, this is a challenging one, which is around school placement. Obviously, we're not able to prove every single allegation or disprove every allegation. And so you have some very tense sort of situations. As the father of two girls now, one who just graduated out and one who's now entering into Montgomery County Public Schools, and having three children go through the entire system, it's one that's kind of interesting in terms of how difficult it would be to, for every allegation, be able to separate, send a child to another school, depending on the outcome of what it is, or at least keep them out of classes. The reality is this, is that any child that interacts in that school, once that allegation has been made, and whether it's been proven or not, we still have the responsibility as a school system to educate every child. And so it really becomes difficult, right? What leads us in terms of, and it's one of the questions that was a premise, but I think the greater philosophy is what's at hand here. What leads us in terms of how best to keep a perpetrator and a victim away from each other? And then also, so that's in proven cases, but then in unproven cases where you still know that there's going to be drama associated with, because once I've said somebody did something to me, there's an issue, right? And so what happens even in those sort of situations? Do we do circles afterwards with parents and with students to try and bring folks together? We didn't talk about those kinds of things, so I'm just curious about some of those other pieces beyond just the you're in this class track and you're in that class track.
Yeah, I think, first of all, when there are, when an incident has occurred and it has been determined, no matter how serious it has been determined that something did occur, then we put the safety plan in place. However, it's important to note that in most instances, when there is a request from the parent of the victim, and most of the time it's coming from the parent of the victim for an administrative placement to another school, we do that immediately. We don't really ask a whole lot of questions, because we need to put the student in the safest environment that he or she can be in order to be properly educated. So we go ahead, we leave it up to them, we tell them. That's one of the things I think that we offer. I know as a principal, that was one of the things that I offered. I think many of my principal colleagues did the same thing. It was a situation, and we have judgment. We can determine whether or not it's going to be a really bad situation for this student. And then we would offer, I think that's something that you should consider possibly going to another school. But then you have to deal with the student who says, well, why should I transfer? I'm the victim here. Why should I transfer? And so then you have to it's a delicate balance in working with the victim and working with the offender and seeing what can be in the best interest of both. If you want to continue your education in an environment where you feel safe and where you feel that you're going to be protected, perhaps looking at going to school over here or going to another school, either one of them, we can provide them with those opportunities and those options. To your point, where there is going to be drama based upon an allegation that was either founded or unfounded, and how the two coexist, I think our high school principals have experienced enough of this that they have a pretty good idea on how to handle it and how to keep the students apart from each other, and to create safety plans for each student, that immediately when there is something that occurs, they will go to an assistant principal or they go to a counselor and say, this, and this happened. And it takes the form of how you handle the discipline at that point and how you deal with the parents at that point as well. And to your point, yes, we do call them in together as a part of our restorative justice program for circles. And I've seen situations where there have been, and we work very closely with our outside partners to create, bringing outside people from outside the community, outside the school community, to come in and run those circles. An objective person to come in and run those circles and have that conversation, parent to parent, student to student. And some instances that works very well, and some instances not so much so. But it is an opportunity for the parents to have some type of role in all of this and maintaining the fact that they want their child to be safe in this particular building, and what are you, Principal X, going to do to ensure their safety?
So thank you for that, Dr. Johnson. That's incredibly important. I want to piggyback on something Councilmember Navarro also said at the beginning, which dealt with language capacity as well, because, and for me personally, it's one in which I don't think a lot of people know what their rights are. And unless it explicitly is stated as to what a person's rights are, they may not know to ask that a person be assigned to another school because that's appropriate for their child. And again, unless those rights are delineated in languages for those potential families, that also is something that should be there. It should be something as kind of a resource guide. Again, you have a lot of, let me pay you kudos. You guys have a lot of resources online when it comes to cyberbullying, sexual assault, all those kinds of things, and they're translated all online. I would just add this as one of those to the list of things that you have that in the case of this, right? It doesn't have to be forward facing because it's not something that needs to be there for everyone to always look at, but that's accessible for folks that they can go on and say, if this is the case, you've had a child who's been assaulted, whatever the case may be, this is the link so that you know this is the process. These are the things that you have as rights to ask for, things that are embedded, so that folks just know, right? Because information is power. We know that. And so many people don't have the information, don't have the access to that information, and therefore lose the power that we know is going to benefit them in terms of making sure that their child has the best outcomes. Whereas a person who is of means, who speaks English as a first language, their parents are all over this. So even if they're the perpetrator, right, they know what their rights are. And they know that their child still has a right to an education here in Montgomery County. And I don't want my child transferred because he plays on the football team. And so therefore, trust me, I know you've heard and seen all of those kinds of things as well, right? So again, it should be that ebb and flow of that both folks should be able to have access to that type of information. I think that would be helpful in the overall situation. I don't see any other questions from my colleagues. So let me just say thank you. This has been really, really good. You've heard some great recommendations. It's the reason why I wanted my colleagues to go first, because they addressed a lot of the points. You heard great ideas from Councilmember Navarro, great ideas from Councilmember Juwando that you guys are going to implement, which is fantastic. This is how we continue to get better. It's the reason why we are one of the best education systems in the nation, because we continue to take feedback and make it work for us and make us even better as an organization, and that is phenomenal. And I say we because I'm invested. I've still got some kids in it, so it's still we. Councilmember Juwando is just starting, so he's got a long time. He's going to be saying we for a long time.
Not only is it flashbacks, this weekend I found my 4th grade report card, from elementary, and I was going through some of my dad's old stuff. And so yeah, I've been in it, and I've got a long time to go. So
there you go. Councilmember Juwando keeps pressing the reset button.
Right. So as a follow-up, Council Member Rice, I want to make sure that I've captured everything here that we're going to do and get the information back to you. Mr. Edmondson and his staff will survey our schools at the request of Councilmember Navarro to determine the bilingual staff we have in our schools who are working with our students around this particular issue. Councilmember Juwando specifically asked about some type of a climate survey, and Mr. Edmondson has promised that he would include that information in a student module that we're creating for all of our students to participate in. And then, Councilmember Rice, you asked for more definitive information around what exactly is done during the investigatory process, and we'll provide that information with you as well. Did I capture everything? And I like the idea of the mobile app, so I'm going to take that one back, Councilmember Juwando. I'm going to take that one back as well.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, just the and that might not be the only way, but continuous on ramps and multiple ways for people to report,
I mean, Mr. Edmondson mentioned that we have a Dropbox, but perhaps, Dropbox is kind of old school, and it's not exactly right up to speed with what these students are dealing with right now and how they deal with social media and Snapchat and Instagram and all those different ones like that. So I like that idea, and we'll take that back to see if there's something that will bring us up to modern day social media guidelines that the students will find familiar and that they can work with. So is there anything else that we left out from those, that I may have left out from our conversation discussion today, Councilmember Rice?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
If I could, just before we shut down.
Councilmember Juando, go ahead.
Thank you. The issue of follow-up after the fact, with mental health supports for impact, both, on students that are impacted and even bystanders that are impacted. That's something that we are constantly talking about the need for. We've been talking about this last week, but just mental health resources for our students in general, for the public in general, but students in general, particularly as we try to deal with COVID and everything that's just going on. That's something, you can respond now or get back to us. If just, I think the things that we're suggesting here are going to increase the number of responses and incidences that you're going to get. And even the investigations that you're currently going through, coupled with what's going on with COVID, I just think we're going to need to factor that into our more robust response around the mental health needs of our students. So, that's probably a longer conversation, but I think we need to mention it in this context as well.
No, I completely agree. And if I can piggyback off of you, Councilmember Juando, I think that, again, that is in line with what our current recommendations are. It is my hope that the additional bridge funding, and we'll have to decide how that bridge funding is allocated. That bridge funding is outside of the governor's veto. But certainly from that standpoint, it did provide for additional counselors to be there, to provide a more robust system that's set up. Something that we need to take a look at when it comes to the environment that we find ourselves in, that is online until the end of January at this point, and could quite possibly be till the end of the next school year. I mean, we also need to face that reality as well. If, experts are saying what they are saying about the fall spike that they've been talking about, and we never even anticipated a summer spike, and we are spiking, folks. Even here in Montgomery County, our numbers are going up. And so from that perspective, we say to ourselves, okay, so what does that mean for the fall, which then translates into, if we're leaning into that with the fall and us having a spike combined with the flu spike that we normally have. Folks have forgotten about the fact that we normally have our flu season anyway. Those actually could be very detrimental for us in terms of returning back to the classroom. And so therefore we need to look at different models of setup. And so, Councilmember Juando, I couldn't agree with you more that we need to make sure, as we're transitioning into something that, look, we'll have kids who would have almost been out of school for an entire year, right? Come into January, it'll almost be a full year that they have not been in a school building. That says something. That's something that a lot of kids weren't mentally prepared for. It's going to have different effects on them. So we are going to have to stand up something that's very different. I agree, Councilmember Juando, and so that's going to be a much larger discussion that we'll have to have this fall when we return in September and talk about what is everything that we will need for our system moving forward in the future. Any other comments from my folks for the greater good? If not, again, I want to thank each and every one of you, Mr. Edmondson, Mr. Clark, Dr. Johnson, Ms. Ahn. Really appreciate it. And then Mr. Howard and Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, I really appreciate your great work on the packet. And it's my colleagues, Councilmember Navarro and Councilmember Duando. This was an awesome discussion. I mean, and every point that you guys have brought up was just spot on and really helps. It's going to help get us to an even better place. So thank you very much. You guys take care, stay safe, and we are adjourned.